I'm Professor Neil Greenberg, and I'm going to show you now a demonstration of a TRiM interview. That's a trauma risk management interview. One of my colleagues, Gavin, will be playing the part of a cameraman who was involved in an incident in Libya in which someone was injured and someone was killed. The TRiM process is a way of trying to support colleagues who have been through difficult experiences to make sure that their mental health is protected. It's a 5-stage process. The first stage is the introduction, in which you explain the confidentiality, the purpose of the interview, and what we hope to get out of it. The second stage is the before, which is when we talk about what happened before the incident. That sets the scene and makes it the beginning of a nice, easy conversation. The third stage is the during, in which we talk about the incident itself and what happened. The next stage is the after, in which we discuss how someone's been since the incident occurred. And the last stage is the exit, in which we sum up what we've heard and provide some reassurance and advice about the future. Hi, Gavin. My name's Neil.
Hi, Neil.
I think we've met before, but perhaps a while back. I'm here to have a chat with you, to have a TRiM interview. And TRiM is a process that the BBC now use to try and support people who have been through difficult incidents such as yourself. Now, this meeting is completely confidential. None of the discussion we'll have here will ever leave this room, so you can be reassured. Now, the only time that isn't true is if you told me something that gave me really serious concerns for your safety or the safety of others, in which case I might have to speak to someone else. But if I ever did, I promise you I would always speak to you about that first. Now, the interview will follow a 5-stage process. We'll chat about this introduction, before, during and after, and then we'll come to some sort of view at the end. And the idea of it is to find out how you're doing and to see whether there's any more support that we can offer you or any advice. Have you got any questions at all?
No, that seems fine.
Great. And if anything happens as we go along that's causes you any difficulty, just let me know.
Okay.
Well, listen, I know the event happened in Libya, say about 4 days ago. Just tell me a little bit about how long you'd been in Libya before it happened.
I've probably been there about 2 months, working in the sort of same area, around Misrata. Working as a team, we got Dave, the reporter, Kathy, the producer, and we've had Alan with us, who's the security guy, and been sort of moving out, picking up a bit of footage, doing some sort of, reports, moving back. We set ourselves up in Misrata, and effectively everything was going okay. A lot of things going on. Talking to a lot of the other crews that are out there as well, CNN in particular, because they're sort of just around the back from where we are.
Right. So pretty busy then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're sort of very wary of what's going on because everything's sort of moving so quickly over there. The front line and all the rest of it. So we're relying, very much on Alan and his experience, even though we've all been involved in other areas. Really, it's sort of Alan that's sort of, keeping us, safe, I suppose, and where we should be.
And had you been doing a good job? Had it been successful?
Yeah, we'd got just about everything, we needed to. Some fairly traumatic sort of things going on over there, and especially, some of them are sort of doing to each other. But we've got some good reports out. Everybody back home, back in London, pretty happy with what's going on, what we've been sending back. So I think as a team we tend to work well together and get on. So it's all been good. Okay.
And in terms of the incident itself, what sort of time of day did that happen?
That was sort of early part of the morning.
Okay.
We'd set off quite early, but and we'd been to that area before, so it was nothing that we hadn't done before. And really, we expected to go to the same area to then talk to one of the rebel commanders to try and get an interview. We'd heard that he was in the area, but it didn't quite work out that way.
Okay, so you've been in Libya for quite a while. Things have been going generally pretty well, and you set out this particular day to go and interview a rebel commander.
Yeah.
So tell me, what was the first thing you noticed when things didn't go quite to plan?
I suppose when we were heading towards what we thought was the front line, that's where we'd been the day before. There were a lot of rebel, troops around. And when we arrived, there were only a few. A lot of the sort of holes they'd made in the ground, there weren't many vehicles there. The day before there'd been lots of vehicles. And it just seemed a little bit strange, that the guys that were left behind weren't your sort of older, more sort of experienced looking guys. And the driver, our minder, got out, had a quick chat with him, or fixer, had a quick chat with him, and then he came running back to the vehicle, jumped in, and said, the front line's moved. So Alan said, right, let's go.
Okay.
And we just went steaming off.
Right.
Towards, you could smell, that smell of, burning vehicles, rubber and stuff like that. Couldn't see anything burning in that area, but in the distance you could see it. So just wondered, and that was my first thought was, hang on a minute, we'd sort of seen me rushing a bit here. We've done it in the past, but it was just a sense of foreboding, if you like, with this. It just seemed a little bit too rushed.
Something wasn't quite right.
Yeah, we hadn't really thought it through.
Okay. So what happened next?
When we arrived to what we found out to be the front line, you could see loads of vehicles. So we slowed down as we got a bit closer to those vehicles, a lot of burning vehicles, but everybody seemed to be sort of just milling around. Nobody, as they do, nobody sort of taking charge. Very big sort of blobs of people.
Right.
We could see a big tanker that had exploded right in the middle of the road. It all burnt out, but it was quite a sort of spectacular shot, if you like. And I was sort of looking at that straight away and thought, that'll be good as a backdrop. The rebel commander, as we could see, CNN got there before us.
Right.
So they were on the other side of a sort of armoured vehicle, a captured armoured vehicle. So they were on the other side doing their interview. So we thought, right, let's do a piece first. So we went over to this tanker, and we were setting up. Dave and Kathy were talking. Alan was just milling about. He was talking to a couple of the, the soldiers and what have you. Doing his bit, I suppose. Checking out. But they all seemed a little bit sort of tense. And you couldn't help but think, well, how long ago has this front moved? And how are things? He just had that sense right from the start that things weren't going to go quite to plan.
And then what happened after that?
We were sort of doing our piece. In fact, Kathy and Dave were sort of chatting, and we were just lining up to sort of start filming. And then, I've heard it before. We've all heard it before. The incoming sound of a shell coming in. And the next thing I knew, I was hitting the ground. Some other people got sort of that blast when it went off. I mean, luckily for us, I found out afterwards it went off on the other side of the armoured vehicle.
Right.
So in a way, that sort of protected us a bit from the blast. The CNN guys weren't quite so lucky, but the noise from it was absolutely deafening. It's the closest I think I've been to a shell, a rocket, whatever it was that went off. It sounded really big and powerful. We were all covered, it showered in earth, stuff like that. Ears were ringing. And all I could hear was people screaming, people shouting, just that, ultimate sort of sense of panic, if you like.
Was it just one rocket or shell that came in?
It was initially, and there were more came in afterwards, but we'd got away from it by that stage. But after that first one, somebody started shouting, "Go, go, go." I'm assuming it was Alan. I wasn't sure at the time, but it was in English. Lots of, obviously, Libyans screaming and shouting at each other. People, I think, shouting in pain, screaming in pain. So lots of smoke. So we jumped, sprinted back to the vehicle. We all managed to get in, just piled on top of each other. I don't even think the doors were shut. And Alan was still shouting, "Go, go, go." And luckily, Fixer, the driver, had got in as well. So we managed to drive away. And as we went away, I sort of looked back. And I could see what I thought was the rebel commander. It turned out to be him, and he'd been blown, into the road effectively. We had to almost go around him, what was left of him. And couldn't see the CNN guys. We sort of driving away. And then as we got further away from it, started to think, maybe we should have been helping them. We're all in this together. But really, nobody sort of talked about that. I shouted to go back for them. really it was Alan that sort of just said, go, you know, and he just kept screaming, go, go, go.
And you went,
We went, and, you know, just went back towards where we came from.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like it was a highly challenging incident. Did you think that you might be in danger yourself?
I've got to admit, when that first shell came in, you know, because it just sounded like it was going to hit right in the middle of us, I honestly thought, you know, we were going to die. And because after that first one, I thought there's going to be more following this, because generally you get one comes in and then you get a pattern after that. And I thought, this is it. You know, if we don't get out of here quick enough, then we're going to catch this up.
Okay. And what about your actions? You sounded like you responded to what people said you should do and got in the vehicle.
I suppose I did, but, you know, and I think that was probably hearing somebody shouting, go, 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 thinking that the vehicle was some form of protection, but it was certainly an escape mechanism to get out of the area. And I suppose in that sense, you know, I didn't sort of freeze or, you know, just sit there and look around. You know, I thought, I'm going with it, you know, if it means getting out of here.
Absolutely.
And let's get out of here. So.
And then you got to somewhere safe-ish?
Yeah, we got back to where we were with the other guys, and they could see that something had gone on, and obviously, you know, they heard, you know, the shelling, but a lot of that was going on in the background anyway. You know, there was a lot of shooting just before we left, and as we were getting in the vehicle, it just sounded like, as they do, you know, they just all start shooting into the desert. You know, it's just bizarre. You know, from what I could see as we were driving away, you know, there was nobody that they were shooting at. They were just all, you know, firing in the general direction of where the front was, I suppose.
And did you then stay in somewhere safe, or did you?
No, we drove straight back. We had a quick chat in the vehicle, you know, about the CNN guys, because we couldn't see them. And then we got back, you know, into Misrata. And then we sort of sat down, didn't really talk about it, you know, just got the kid out of the vehicle. Very sort of quiet, nobody sort of chatting. I remember thinking in the back of my mind, you know, whether or not we should have gone back, you know, for the CNN guys. I've heard since that one of them lost an arm. They all were caught in the blast, all went to hospital and all got out. But they were there for some time afterwards, till they got, you know, out of the area. And I suppose, in retrospect, you know, should we have done more to have sort of helped in that?
And these situations, I mean, being in Libya is always going to be challenging in that kind of environment. But looking back, do you think it could have been avoided, or it's one of those things about being in the job?
Well, I think it could have been, yeah, because, you know, Alan, I mean, fair play to him. He's done a good job up till now. You know, he's kept us sort of briefed. You know, he's made us aware of, you know, any problems, you know, any sort of quick changes to our plans, advised us, you know, pretty well. He's got a lot of experience, but really that day it just seemed a bit of a rush. Okay. So I don't know if he had other things on his mind. You know, for me to pick that up, you know, and he just seemed very rushed. So whether or not he's got other things going on, but he should have been a bit more aware, because these guys just didn't look up to him. When we arrived at that front line, you know, I could sense it, and he must have done with his experience that things weren't right. So, you know, I've been thinking about it, you know, maybe he should have made a decision to pull us out of there straight away, because you could sense that those guys were really tense, fired up, and, you know, they probably only just got into that area, so there was a good chance of a counter-attack. So really we shouldn't have been in the area, in my view.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so then in terms of the incident, just sort of summing up what I think you told me is that the situation was unclear, and then this shell or shelling came in, and luckily you managed to get out from that area, and your team was okay, but other people were either injured or as you say, the rebel commander may well have been killed. It's now 4 days. How have things been since?
Pretty sort of tense, you know, amongst us. We've not really talked about it. We've just got on with, you know, what we've had to do. London said we've got to stay out here to go through this process, which is fair enough. You know, we've managed to sort of get rid of a backlog, you know, of work that we had, and we've been nipping out, doing some fairly sort of local work. Right. Not going out too far. I've had a chat with, you know, the guys about work, but we haven't really talked about this. I've heard that the CNN guys are all okay, bar, you know, the cameraman who lost an arm, but you know, at least they're safe. The rebel commander was killed.
Right.
So we've had an update, on that, and that front has been moving back and forth, as you probably know, over the past few days as well. So
it's a highly changing
fluid
situation. Yeah. So it's not unusual after these sorts of events that sometimes people notice that their sleep's not been so good or they're finding it difficult to concentrate. Have you found that at all?
Yeah, I mean, concentration I've really struggled with, and again, because some of the work that you've got to do, you've got to be concentrating on what you're doing. I've been making a lot more mistakes and having to redo things. I'm finding it really difficult to sleep at the moment, which I've never really had problems with, and I'm struggling at the moment. And it's that sound, that shell sound. I've heard it in the past. It scares you at the time, but you get over it. But this time, because it was so close, I think I'm struggling with sleep every time I try to sleep. I'm just not getting there because I get back to being stood just as we're about to start filming, and then this whistling noise of the shell coming in, and it's
you keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes people also notice that they're a bit more jittery or a bit more irritable. Has that been the case at all? I'm quite an irritable type of person anyway. I can be quite short-tempered. Sometimes you've got that one chance to get a shot, and if people aren't, they're not doing what you're asking them to do, then it can be quite frustrating. But I've been all right with Kathy and Dave, but Alan, I think I've been a little bit short with him. He's been good with us, I've got to admit, but I just can't get it out of my head that he should have picked up on the vibe that I felt when we got to that area, that something wasn't quite right, and he should have made a decision. It's his job. He gets paid a lot of money, which frequently tells us the amount that he's on, so he should keep us out of danger as best he can. I know it's not impossible. There's always every chance that we're going to get caught out, but he should have picked up on that, in my view, and he didn't. Okay. And it sounds like you said you've been doing some work and going out locally and getting a few things done, doing the edits. Do you think you've been pretty much as you can keeping to a routine of sorts?
We've spent a fair bit of time doing what we would do if we were sort of going to work in the local area, with all the editing and things like that and local work. But I've got to admit, the concentration-wise, I've found that I'm probably behind on my work, and what I should have been getting out at the moment. And I suppose part of that is thinking about, I'm single. I suppose in a way it's thinking, I don't really have a lot going on in my life. And I suppose this incident has just highlighted that. I've got nothing to go back to. You can have as much money as you want in the bank and things like that, but if you've got nobody to sort of share that with, and I haven't for some time, and I sometimes wonder, do I need to be doing this? Should I not be at home sort of enjoying, what I've got, and trying to sort of make something of my life back there, and sort of putting myself in this sort of danger in these hostile areas. It's I've sort of questioned, I think, why I'm doing what I'm doing, because sooner or later there's a good chance that I'm going to get
something
caught
bad
out.
might happen.
Yeah.
Any other sort of stressful things or events happening at the moment? Anything? You mentioned the team's perhaps a little bit less together because of your concern about sort of Alan's behaviour. Anything else going on that's particularly stressful at the moment?
No, not really. I suppose we were a little bit miffed that we had to stay out here. When you have something like that happen, it highlights your vulnerabilities, and I suppose we all wanted to get back. And when we were told we had to stay out here, we made the decision that we were going to sort of stay in this, the local area, and just try and get some work out of the way, do some local stuff. So I suppose in that respect it was frustrating, and we were a little bit angry, initially when we were told that we had to stay here for this. But once we got on with things, and we know that there's benefits to this, So, you know, we just got on with it. So,
have you? I mean, clearly you've been doing your job a while now. Have you been involved in kind of difficult or traumatic incidents like this before?
well, I suppose we all have, you know, to sort of varying degrees, but it has made me think of a few that I've been involved in, and it's just highlighted that vulnerability. You know, this one was just too close. In my view, you know, lots of other situations, and I've thought about them, but not overly. But it just highlights that, you know, the vulnerability. You know, when you look at, you know, the state of that rebel commander, you know, the guys that were injured, the CNN guy, cameraman that's lost his arm, and you're thinking, if we'd have got there just a little bit before the CNN guys, that would have been us.
Right.
Because we were going to do exactly what they were doing. It's just that they got there before us.
And so the other incidents that you've been involved with, you say none of them have been as sort of traumatic or difficult as this one?
Some of them have been, because sometimes it's the aftermath, you know, of a massacre or something like that. With it, a film, you know, when you're filming, you know, children, it's, you know, a couple of the others have got kids, you know, and they find that quite difficult. As much as you try and divorce yourself from it, it's difficult. But I think when it highlights your vulnerability like this one has, you know, and you know, it was just too close, and you know, I've got to admit, you know, I've been seriously thinking over the past few days, you know, whether or not I want to be doing this, whether or not I want to find something else, you know, obviously within the BBC that I can be doing that wouldn't put me in sort of situations like this.
Right. And you mentioned that you haven't got anyone sort of special back at home, and that the team hadn't really spoken about the event very much. Have you spoken about it to anybody, you know, other members of your family or anyone else out here?
No, there's nobody back there really that I sort of talk to.
You don't phone home back to?
No. And none of us are really talking about it. We just got on with our work. The only guy really is Alan, you know, and we sort of had a few crosswords about, you know, why he didn't pick up on it, but we didn't go in, you know, to the incident in any detail.
And then the last kind of sort of area to chat about is alcohol. Now I know, you know, people out here, or when they're busy, often drink a bit anyway. Have you found your alcohol use has changed at all since this happened?
It has. And I mean, I suppose, you know, I've sort of had a few drinks with, you know, David. I mean, his drink's definitely gone up. But I suppose, you know, we enjoy a drink, you know, when we come back, you know, when we're having a bit of downtime, there's not a lot else to do other than work and just try and, you know, have something to enjoy. But I have been drinking more, mainly with David, but now and again I've sort of drank on my own, which I don't necessarily tend to do. I haven't done that in the past. You know, I might have one beer, but I tend to be having probably a bit more than I should do at the moment.
And just beer, or are you using other?
No, I don't touch shorts. It's just beer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks very much for chatting, and I know that perhaps was a bit difficult to talk through that all again. It strikes me that you've been through a really difficult incident, and as you said, much of what happened is down to luck or fate or whatever you might call it, and clearly at the moment you're finding it a bit difficult. Now you said you've been through incidents before, and I've chatted to lots of people who have been through challenging incidents, and what I can say is at the moment, although you're thinking about what you should do with your future and things don't seem so good, most people find that if you leave it a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks normally, that actually a lot of the things you're experiencing will tend to sort of sort themselves out. And often people don't need any complicated treatment or therapy at this point, mostly just getting on with your life, being a little careful perhaps with alcohol, trying to stick to a routine, which I know is challenging out here. And finding some people that you trust to sort of talk things through with, that can make a really big difference. Now, I've got this leaflet here which has got some information in it. You haven't got to read it now, but I think you'll find that a lot of the things you're experiencing are in that leaflet because they are normal reactions to what has been a challenging event. Now, it's normal practice with the TRiM process that I will formally sit down with you again in about a month's time. I think you'll probably be back in the UK at that point, which is fine, and we'll do that there.
Okay.
But there's some contact details in there for myself and for other support processes. And really, whilst you're feeling a bit different or a little bit distressed as you are at the moment, I think accessing support, trying to get a bit of help from people that you know and you trust is really useful. But just to reassure you, most of these things will settle by themselves. Now, as I say, in a month's time, we will sit down and have another chat, but you've got my contact details in there, and if I haven't heard from you by, say, the middle of next week, I'll get back in touch anyway. Maybe we'll have a cup of coffee back in New Broadcasting House if we can find a decent place to have one. Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to ask of me?
No, just thank you really. I found it useful, having a chat.
Okay.
And obviously I'll take in what you said, and I'll try and get the others to have a chat as well.
Yeah, and just to reassure you, we will be chatting to everybody else who's been involved. Now, the very last piece is about your work, and you clearly you're getting on with your work out here, and when you get back to the UK, no doubt you'll carry on with your work. As you said yourself, your concentration not necessarily ideal at the moment. Would you be happy if I spoke to one of your bosses? I wouldn't give them any of the details of what we've spoken about, but just to say that actually Gavin's having a bit of a tough time. It'll probably be okay. We'll keep an eye on him anyway. Normal process, but just so that they're aware and they can perhaps keep an eye out. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And perhaps we'll chat afterwards about who the best person is for me to speak to.
Yeah,
Great.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much indeed.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. We're now going to see a follow-up TRiM interview. This takes place about a month after the initial interview. Its purpose is to find out how someone's been doing since the initial interview happened and to see whether there's anything more that needs to be done. If people aren't doing well at this interview, this is the time that you would think about trying to refer them on to see a health professional or mental health professional to get a proper assessment to see if they might need any formal treatment or not. Hi Gavin, really good to see you again.
And yourself.
It's been about a month now since we had our first chat when I think we were still out in Libya, weren't we, at that point. Now this is a standard procedure. This is the follow-up chat that we have as part of the TRiM process. And this is to find out really how things have been since that initial interview. And I know in the first few weeks after we chatted, we had a bit of contact anyway. But broadly, how have things been since and what are they like now?
After I'd spoke to you, we had a couple more days in Libya and then we came back, back into London and effectively, had a bit of time off. And it was sort of reflecting, on what we'd talked about, and what had happened. And I suppose I was still thinking quite a lot about, the incident. But I've got to admit, since then, work has just been full on. You had a few days off and, I've been doing a lot of stuff back here, preparing to go away again. Things, have got a lot better. I've been able to sort of get on with my work, and it's going really well, I have to admit. And, I've now got a girlfriend, which is good. And so I've got something else in my life, other than work, which I'm finding, enjoyable. So really, it's going, forward. And I know I talked about, whether or not I'd be doing this in the future. I think, I've just had, the sort of, that excitement, of going away, just sort of built up again, and I'm really looking forward to going away, and it's just not fazing me at all thinking about, getting back out there.
Right.
So, it's all really sort of good and positive at the moment.
Good. Well, listen, if it's okay, I'm just going to run over a few of the things we talked about last time. Now, when we spoke before in Libya, you kind of mentioned that you thought that maybe things might have happened differently and that maybe you might have done some different things or maybe Alan might have done some different things. What's your sort of thinking on that now?
When we came back, we were on the plane together, and I think really that was the first time we started to talk, about the incident. And to be honest, when you sort of replay it and you're actually talking to somebody about it, and I had thought about it after I'd spoken to yourself, really there wasn't anything we could do, with the CNN guys. If we'd have gone back, all we'd have been doing is putting ourselves, in further danger. And, So the thoughts of should we have done something differently changed, if you like. I didn't feel, as bad about it. I felt really bad after the incident. I felt we should have been doing something, or should have done something at the time. And when I look back on it now, I've met up with one of the CNN guys since, and effectively, it was a consensus was that, we'd have done exactly the same as you if it'd been the other way around. And that sort of made me feel a bit better about things.
What about your sort of views on Alan?
To be honest, I should have said something if I was that. And I suppose what I'm taking out of this as well is, it's one of those experiences, we got away with it. In future, if I feel we're going into, I've got a lot of experience as well, and hostile environment courses and what have you as well. But and if I feel that we're going into that sort of environment and I've got any concerns, then really I should be raising them, with the security advisor. Yeah. So in the future, that's exactly what I'm going to do, rather than just sort of sit on it and think, is it just me? I should have been a bit more forthcoming. So I've taken that out of this as well.
Okay. And in terms of your sleep, what's that like now?
It's great. Yeah, great at the moment. Got back. It was still a little bit that day or two afterwards in Libya, unsettled. But once we'd had, the flight back, the chat on the plane, we chatted afterwards. It just really started to get back into sort of normal swing of things. So it's been really good since. I'm back into that sort of normal pattern, really.
Great. Okay, that sounds really good. And you mentioned about work being really busy.
Yeah.
Good busy?
It is very good. Yeah. I felt really down when I spoke to you last time, and I think that was because it was so close to the incident. But since I've been back, it's just that hunger to get out there again and do it. I really enjoy what I do, and that was just an experience that I need to sort of learn a few things from, which I'm going to take forward.
Great. So. And then the last thing is, when we talked before, you were perhaps drinking a little bit more than was ideal.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you need to be teetotal, but how are things there?
Bar having quite a few on the plane on the way back, is back into a normal sort of drinking routine now. I'll maybe have, a beer, in the evening, but that's purely one beer, and that's just to have with a meal. If I'm going out with my girlfriend, we'll maybe have some wine or something like that on the weekend. I only get to see her on the weekend, so my drinking habits are very much as they were before the incident.
Right,
so
okay.
which is good.
And it sounds like you've been spending some time speaking about the incident to other people.
Yeah. And I think, as you rightly said, it is good to talk, and after I'd spoken to you, it did make me sort of able to sort of think and talk about it a lot easier, and I think that's, what needed to break the ice, if you like, with us. We've been through incidents before because this was such a close call. And I think what happened to the CNN crew, and should we and shouldn't we have done certain things, and I think that aspect of it, we just came out of it, and we just found ourselves able to talk a lot more freely about it, and we just talk about it now as one of those experiences.
Absolutely.
And it's you just put it down as one of those sort of things.
And it sounds like you're reasonably positive about the future and about your job.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sort of reinvigorated, and looking forward to getting out there again, I suppose.
Great. Well, listen, that all sounds great. I certainly, in my TRiM role, I've got no concerns that you're going to have any difficulties. When we spoke last time, I did have a brief chat with your agreement to your boss. If it's okay, I'd just like to have another chat with her and basically just say that, from my point of view, Gavin's back to being Gavin.
Yep.
Now, the only thing to say is things are nice and rosy now, and hopefully they'll stay that way. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes people find that as time goes on, their view of the incident might change, and it might become more negative. It can also become more positive too at times. If you do find any difficulties, then what I would suggest is, if things really appear to be getting worse, come and have a chat with me, have a chat with your doctor or with some friends, but don't be afraid of coming forward and getting some help. Lots of people in your situation find later on, that actually their life's great, but a few, will go on and have some difficulties. Hopefully you'll be in the get on with life category.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think you should be. It all seems good.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else you want to ask or chat about at the moment?
No. Just to thank you again, Neil, for having the chat.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you too.
Thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thanks
very much, Neil. Bye-bye.
So what you've seen in those two interviews is an initial TRiM chat, which happened 4 days after the event, and one that happened again, the follow-up, about a month later. Initially, Gavin was having some difficulties. That's to be expected. He'd been through a really difficult and challenging incident. But as we predicted, over time, he's made sense of the incident and he's recovered and he's now getting on with his life and is motivated to carry on doing his job. Everything's not rosy. He's still got a few concerns about what the security advisor might have told him to do, but in general, Gavin's made a good recovery. As you've seen also, we've injected into the conversation the fact that a few people do experience difficulties much later on, and that we've tried to encourage Gavin that if he does have difficulties, he should seek help at that time. And the TRiM process therefore is a way of watchful waiting, monitoring people, seeing how they're doing, giving them advice, and then for the few people who do need it, in this case not Gavin, getting them to access proper help and support if they need it.